So this month, I've read 4 books, and I thought it would be a good idea to make a book review. And so I'll do a quick summary of each individual book, and then I'll give my ratings on it, my thoughts and opinions, any notable quotes, and yeah, just really talk about how I perceive the book. So, these are the 4 books that I've read this month. This one is called The Book Thief. This one's The Vegetarian, which is really, obviously the author has, in the previous year, gotten really popular. And then a book called Nausea, and The Safekeeper. So I have these 4 lovely books. I'll break these down in the order that I read them in, which was this one. This was the first one that I read. I have this book tracker, or like I write my thoughts on the books that I've read, like a book review type of journal for myself after I read books. And this is something that I've actually started this year. Technically, I started it at the end of 2025. But I guess I can call it a new thing, because it's not something I've been doing for a long time, right? I never make annotations on books, but so a funny story is I have an obsession with like keeping all my books perfectly as neat as possible. Like the fact that this has like a crease. I don't know if you can see the crease, but there's a crease here. There. Do you see this crease? This fold? And so how it got here was I put this on the car seat, and my family and I went out to eat lunch. And when we went back to the car, my sister sat on it by accident, and she created this crease, which is, devastating at first, but now it's fine, right? And I'm like, to have stains on it as well, to have stains on the books or like a bent page was something that always bothered me. But I thought, you know what? This book is already creased and damaged, so I might as well write in it and annotate in it. So for the first time in my life, I actually, I guess you could say, properly annotated or wrote in a book. I don't know if you can tell the things that I wrote. I didn't try to like annotate in the sense of like, oh, I must write something down, but more so in the sense that, oh, if there was anything intriguing to me, something I thought was valuable or worthy of noting, then I'd take a note of, or even new words. And so that's that. But anyways, this book essentially is a philosophical book. So essentially the main character kind of goes through the realization that like everything has literally no meaning. He goes through existentialism, and it talks about this thing, which is this concept of existence precedes essence. And I thought this was a very interesting philosophical idea, which we can go into later. It's very much a diary of the main character, and so more than like an actual plot, in my opinion, it feels like you're going through a personal journey with the character, where on certain days he's like, oh, you know what, there's no purpose in living anymore, I don't find a reason to exist, and everything becomes nauseous, like he becomes nauseous, this idea of nausea that kind of reaches him, because he comes to this state of awareness and realization that nothing really matters. Like, what does it mean to exist? He goes through this struggle to find meaning. So at first I picked this book because I felt that I was personally in a state similar to this man. So I read it, and just right off the bat I felt very much compassion or empathy for this man. Not only did the writer write so beautifully, it was also so much more enjoyable because I felt like it was relatable. I felt like somebody else understood. Obviously, over time, I realized that perhaps this character's form of existentialism is a bit more severe than my own. When we get toward the end, you kind of see this characterization, the character development. So throughout it, the character's mainly negative, or at least I perceived it that way. So at certain times it got a bit heavy to read, but I really liked the resolution because I felt like it was a really nice way to end things, for given how heavy it felt when I read it, which is kind of funny. It's like a thin book, but it has such a great impact. And so the main idea that I mentioned earlier is this existence precedes essence, which is, as I noted, the central philosophical idea that things and people exist first, and only then do we, or they, assign meaning or essence to them. So there's a heavy emphasis on individual freedom, responsibility, and the act of self-creation. And because there's no preordained path, individuals are condemned to be free and must define their own values and purposes. The traditional viewpoint is that essence precedes existence, which is that God or nature created humans with a predefined purpose. So, for example, a man made a chair. So it's the idea that the purpose or the essence of the chair exists in your mind before the chair is physically made. And then I also noted that I like this book because it feels as if my feelings are validated and that I am not alone, like I said earlier. It feels as if I can let myself sit in my own struggles and anguish without pushing them out or feeling that I shouldn't feel them. In some way, I feel the writer mirrors my own style of writing and journaling, and to write with questions that are meant to sound like definitive sentences. So it's the idea of like the self-doubt and uncertainty that is lingering. And so at first it felt like I was similar to the character, but over time the feeling kind of changed, or rather reduced, because I realized I was in a better position than this man, or at least currently. And so in hindsight, I felt that like it's cool that feelings are this universal, right? Like, given it was a book written in the 1938. When you read this, you're introduced to several different characters, including this girl called Annie, which is his past lover, and also the autodidact. And so in some ways, I kind of like saw myself in all the characters in different aspects. And I liked them for different reasons, but for other reasons as well, it made me despise them for their different unique ways of thinking and behaving. But I think what was really cool was that I could see myself in all these different characters, despite the fact that I liked and disliked all of them. I noted quite a few words that came up throughout the book as recurring foreign vocabulary to me, like superfluous, maxims, somnolence, morose, edification, and portents. And I also noted two of my favorite scenes, which stood out to me. And the first one was when the autodidact and the protagonist shared dinner and had a talk about socialism and humanism, etc. And the other one was toward the end when he reunited with Annie. And so I was really glad the book resolved the way that it did, because I felt it kind of ended a similar way to my own personal journey, like the resolution. And so like through the means of like countless days, right, of rumination and existentialism, and then you kind of see that the character is gradually reaching this point of liberation, and it's filled with both doubt and hope, but it's like a new page. It's like a fresh start, which was very nice, especially given that I read this in December of 2025. And so it felt like very much of a similar place where I was in my own timeline, and it felt like a fresh way to jump or to enter 2026, right? And so I noted key themes, which obviously you have existentialism, you have this thing I noted, contingency, the idea that existence has no inherent necessity or reason, like obviously existence precedes essence. Second, you have freedom, which in this case I think it is optimistic, but it is also so terrifying, because like you're immersed in this infinite sea of opportunities and possibilities, right? And so you must choose and bear the pressure, the responsibilities, which obviously come as a privilege at the end of the day, right? But to know that it exists is kind of scary. And then 3, you have alienation, and 4, the unreliability of your memory, which I think we all know. It's like every time you look back on a certain memory, it kind of changes, right? Because if you think about it, the memories of your past are kind of fiction, because if it changes all the time, you can only rely on what you think is truest, but we don't really know truth either. And so this kind of, I feel like, makes our own identities a bit more, like, it shifts a lot, and it makes you feel a lot more unstable, because you don't really know what's really true about yourself anymore over time. And so I think I did enjoy the read, but I did have to put it down and like pause throughout the month. And it took this long not only because it was a bit heavy and I put it down and kind of gather my thoughts, but also because I was on a trip. And so I did really enjoy it, but I don't know if this was a lack of more academic vocabulary on my part, or that it just kind of flowed a bit more tediously to me. But I think in another sense, the way that this is tedious to me, at least, is kind of reflecting the book, right? Because this is going to be the reality. This is the reality of what it's like to struggle, be in self-doubt, go through existentialism, having identity crises. It's going to be long, it's going to be tedious, it's going to be a heavy and hard journey. So I feel like in that sense it's awesome because it reflects what it's really like, right? To have these bouts of nausea or other forms of anxiety kind of visit you throughout the day, throughout your life, throughout these months that can even accumulate to a year or even years, right? So the second book I read was this book called The Safekeeper. And this book is, I picked it up first because look how beautiful. Look, just like, can we just appreciate how beautiful this book looks? And then I read the summary, and then I'm like, drama. We got some drama going on. I'll read the summary for you. It says, it is 15 years after the Second World War, and Isabel has built herself a solitary life of discipline and strict routine in her late mother's country home, with not a fork out of place. But all is upended when her brother Louis delivers his graceless new girlfriend, Eva, at Isabel's doorstep, as a guest there to stay for the season. In the sweltering heat of summer, Isabel's desperate need for control reaches boiling point. What happens between the two women leads to a revelation that threatens to unravel all she has ever known. And then, we get to this point and we realize, this is not just a historical fiction novel. This is a LGBTQ novel too. It's not like the first novel that's done that, right? But for being what it was, I was intrigued. I mean, how could I not, right? And I thought it was really interesting because you see, it's like a mix of, it's historical fiction, right? It's World War II context. After the World War II context, but historical fiction. And in that time, to have like a same-sex relationship was probably so controversial. Like, I know, like, in modern day, it's not that controversial. I feel like it's getting better, but there's still definitely people that are, like, against it. I know people who are against it, even though I personally don't. I personally support it, but I know people that don't advocate it and are against it. But to imagine it at that time, I thought that was a really good mix. And so you kind of learn, you see the character development, it's beautiful. It's psychological, this tension between the two women. And you kind of see, like, you learn so much about how history has shaped these people. And for being a historical fiction, I felt that in some sense it's relatable. Like, these feelings existed then, like I said earlier in the previous book. It existed then and it exists now. And it can be because of different reasons, but that feeling exists. And I thought, to see the extent people would go for when they're desperate. I gave this book a 4 rating. And I literally read this in the span of like 2 hours, 3 hours. I was on a flight. Yeah, so this is not the first LGBTQ book I've read before, but it was by far the most racy book that I've purchased and read in public before. Guys, when I say that, like, man, I don't even know, like, I was reading on the plane, but, like, I felt like, okay, the person next to me was sleeping. The people behind me were probably, I don't know, watching their show, eating. But I felt like I needed space. I felt like I needed personal space while reading this. And so my first impressions of this book was that it felt kind of like a breakthrough. And so even though it is fiction, I felt it would have been fiction that would have defied the norms of the time. And I had a question, like, I wondered why the author chose to write historical fiction, and if she has had ties to post-war history herself. And the dynamics of the characters and their backstories as set in a post-war time was interesting, but also sad. It was also very insightful. I think at first, more than like highlighting certain literary themes, it felt more like a love story between the two women. And so that was my shallow viewpoint at first, right? And so I did enjoy the plot twist, which was very engaging, but it also made me feel upset the entire fling was a facade. But I didn't really like the ending because it felt a bit unresolved. However, I realized that I did read this in the span of like 2 to 3 hours with almost little to no sleep, so maybe that could have impacted a bit of the process for me. But the psychological tension and the dynamic carried the story, and we learned by the end of the novel that a key theme to the novel is the house. And so, in hindsight, like when I reflected on this, the house is really what drives the story. Sure, you've got the love affair and stuff, but like, it's the house, right? Like, the house is what is motivating the two to be the way they are. It's what makes Eva seduce Isabel, and it's a part of the story that is introduced as critical and transformed as a greater metaphor and a connector of smaller themes. So, both of the women find importance to the house because it has history to them, and both of them struggle with the stubbornness of letting go and losing things, and in some sense I saw myself in that as well. And I thought it was very sad because to both of the women, for different reasons, the house became not only the only sort of like sense of security for them, it becomes identity, becomes kind of like essentially all they have, right? The theme of like attachment is evident. And so I think in hindsight, it's more that I realize it's not that there is no deeper context to this book. It's just that I lacked a bit of historical context and knowledge myself, which made it seem like that at first. I had to do a bit more research to understand the book a bit more. And that's when I was like, oh yeah, I put the pieces together and I'm like, awesome, I like it. Also reading this and reflecting on the idea that, oh, this attachment thing exists made me really question, like, why do we as humans associate our identity so much with what we have or what we had? And from an external review, I noted that, okay, this is quoting it, major Holocaust literature is fixated on more material forms of financial dispossession, such as business and gold. So this makes your possessions even more personal to you. And so this for Isabel, it was a sense of possession contrasting with the dispossession and displacement that the Jews experienced during the war. And so what I thought was ironic was that, like, Isabel was really safeguarding stolen property. Like, she thought it was hers. But no. It was stolen. She didn't steal it, but, like, she inherited it, and it was technically stolen goods, and she thought it was hers the entire time, or her mother's at least. And so the main themes I noted was obsession, discovery of self and identity, the Dutch society versus the silenced Jew experiences, like property confiscation, complex relationships between people in their home, like attachment, right? Just complex relationships between people in general. Obviously, the controversy of LGBTQ and same-sex relationships, the painful process of confronting uncomfortable truths, and the fact that this affair thing, like, could you imagine being in an affair with your sibling's lover? They both recognized it was wrong, but they were so desperate. One was desperate to get the house back. One was desperate because they were deprived of love their entire life, essentially. And on this post-it note, I wrote, to what extent will you do something for love, even if it could be morally wrong? And then I wrote, is it really love to Isabel if she has in actuality been deprived of it her entire life? In other words, could she have mistook it for love and not really known her own feelings? She was kind of pushed into it at first. Even though she found out that she was being deceived, she still goes back for more. Doesn't this demonstrate just how deprived she was? It's so sad to think about why this was all happening, right? It's history, it's war, it's trying to safekeep the things that mean a lot to you. So it's very beautifully written, and the weaving, I don't know what you'd call it, the way the writer writes to mix historical fiction combined with a little bit more of modern problems and other deeper themes. I love it. And then, why am I so pink? Why am I so pink? Maybe it's this lamp. Anyhow, the next book I read, The Vegetarian. Let me know if you've read this. I feel like a lot of bookworms would have read this book. And if you're a bookworm and you didn't read it, that's fine. I mean, I'm late to the party too, so that's okay. I didn't actually buy this book myself. My mom bought it. She didn't. Wasn't her style. So that's how I got to read this book. The summary says, Young-hye and her husband are ordinary people. He is an office worker, she is a dutiful wife, but their marriage is interrupted when Young-hye, seeking a more plant-like existence, commits a shocking act of subversion. She refuses to eat meat. Thus begins a disturbing and thrilling psychological drama about taboo, desire, rebellion, and fantasy. At first, I read the first chapter, and I was like, okay, what is even going on? At first, I thought it was a bit gross. I thought this character was a bit weird. But then I was like, you know what? There's beauty in this weirdness. I think what really kept me reading was the context itself is a bit disturbing, but the way the author wrote it was so beautiful that it kind of kept me going. I gave this a 3-star. I guess more than anything, it was that I was wondering why this book was so praised, right? But I feel like I did read it a bit too fast, and I thought it would be boring because the story didn't seem to go anywhere for a bit. But it was still engaging enough for me to read to the end. And so, I don't know if it was the strangeness of it all that attracted me to it, because it was something unfamiliar and a bit unsettling. But I understand what has actually happened in terms of the story progressing, what the characters actually did, like their actions, the physical things. But I also understand, I can see the mental progression, where the characters are slowly abandoning this sense of morality, the sense of self, and kind of giving up not only on other people, but on themselves too. But I don't really understand Young-hye's, which is the main character, her obsession with being vegetarian. I know in Korea, most people eat meat. Almost everything has meat in it. Obviously, I'm not saying that you can't not find vegetarian food. Is that right? You can't. Traditionally, people would always eat meat, right? But I didn't really see why that was such a big controversial thing. I didn't see why that would be taboo. I understand the things that happened and the progression, but I didn't understand why it was such a bad thing to be vegetarian, right? I think what really made me question it is the authorial intent in choosing that as a form of protest for the character, because you understand that Young-hye turned vegetarian because of her dreams of so in her dreams there's a lot of gore. So she believes she's a plant, which photosynthesis, you need sun and water, you don't really need food. The moral of the story and the links between the themes and specifically being vegetarian and protest was kind of blurry, because as a reader I didn't really feel that I was given a clear insight into what exactly about her dreams were linked to this dissatisfaction she had with her life. And even when those dissatisfactions were evident, it seemed more like a personality thing, because you kind of view her as a boring woman, like a quiet woman. And so maybe it only seemed this way because the story was written in the perspective of her family and the people around her. Not once, or aside from her dreams, is the book actually written in her perspective, right? So you see how people view her, but you never really get a piece of what it's like to be her. At first I did question whether this was just a metaphor, or another way to have communicated what it means to lose yourself to something, to battle your inner demons, and to fight the world around you, and to really explore the extent to which the human mind can drive itself crazy. I did understand the Korean culture and context in defining social rules, and how being unique is kind of frowned upon. For being a feminist book, there's also mentions of bodily autonomy, where essentially her body's the only thing she can control, right? Like especially when her husband kind of saw her as an object, her family kind of force-fed her to eat meat, because like, oh, it's wrong to not eat meat. How the hospital tried to fix her because she didn't eat meat, because her family's saying, oh, she's a problem, she's like stripping herself in public. But I just thought the entire time, not one person tried to, okay, that's a lie. Her brother-in-law tried to understand her, but not one person genuinely tried to be like, you know what, I hear you out and I'm going to understand you. It's more like, okay, I heard your opinion, but I don't understand and I don't want to try to understand, right? And I thought maybe it's like, if I try to understand you or show that I want to understand you, it's going to put me in the same box as you. And I can't have that, because in this culture, that's a no-no. You kind of recognize like the trauma she has, the patriarchy, the abusive men, the emotional numbness that she has, what it means to be a woman. Like especially in modern day, I feel like traditionally it's so easy to define what it means to be a woman. You've got the domestic role, right? You've got to be the person that's more emotional, that more fragile and portrayed as elegant. But nowadays, as times are changing, the boundaries between gender are pretty much not there. Like you can define whoever you want to be, whatever gender you want to be. So it kind of talks about your roles, right, as a woman. Yeah, I guess all of this disassociation was just like, all her behaviors were just for her to cope. I think it was interesting that Young-hae refusing to participate in violence through eating meat is treated as madness, though, because it's kind of ironic, right? It was definitely a very fresh approach, though. And so, like, even though Young-hae wasn't actually directly hurting anybody, everyone tried to fix her and treated her as less of a person because she stepped too far outside the box of what is considered normal. And, like, they just punished her for simply existing as she wanted to be. I know in certain contexts there was, like, when she was in the hospital and she kind of just stripped herself naked and just sat there on the bench and kind of just killed a bird or a pigeon or whatever in her fist. It could be, like, public... what's that word? Public disruption. But, like before she was put to the hospital, she wasn't disturbing anybody. I felt like putting her in the hospital made it worse for her. Like, maybe if you didn't put her in the hospital, maybe things could have been different. I don't know. Yeah, and talking about the perspective, as I mentioned previously, it's very much that, like, the reader, as a reader, I'm not privy to the things going on inside her brain. So it's harder for me to put the pieces together. But it was still a very interesting read. Like, I understand why some people dislike the book. I can see why people are divided about it, because I can see both sides to it. And I wondered if they disliked the book because of how uncomfortable it made them feel. Did it push their boundaries, social or personal? And so reading it, I was uncomfortable at first. But I think the writing style was really beautiful, which kept me reading more than anything. It was definitely explicit, and I don't know if I really liked that, to be fair, because I wasn't expecting it. It wasn't what I was trying to read. Like, I didn't pick it to read that type of content. But it also felt kind of beautiful in the sense that this is like the true naked and raw form of human being. The way we criticize each other. I'm like naked as in physically, sure, but also like in the sense of when you strip yourself bare, it's just like, who are you? Like, what does it mean to be human, right? But I didn't really like the ending because it seemed also a bit unresolved and open-ended. And I wonder if this serves as a bit of a warning in terms of, like, society restricting people. I don't know, it could be. And on these post-its, I just wrote comments on certain pages. Like on page 63, what I gathered from a certain quote is that pretty is subjective. And I wondered, what part of our brain makes it possible for us to think such dark thoughts. And then on page 157, there's a quote which says, "Why is it such a bad thing to die?" And I was like, wait, you're right. Why is it such a bad thing to die? Now, it was eye-opening in the sense that we have been conditioned to think that death is a bad thing. Death, like all things, is an ending, right? Why are endings so sad? Why is it a bad thing? Is it anyone's right to determine whether someone should die or live? If they didn't let her die, would it be because they love her or that they're scared of loss? And does this mean they're selfish enough to want her to stay? And so if both is the case, what is the moral action to take? I thought that was very interesting to think of. And then on a comment on page 170, I felt like something that we as humans struggle with is communication and lending that empathy. And I thought perhaps maybe the solution was just to have done that, to have tried to understand one another without thought to question or judge, to just listen and make each other feel seen. And so maybe it could have helped. Maybe it could have alleviated a bit of the pain, a bit of the struggles, and gotten the characters to a better place. Very much of a social commentary book, which I loved. I love books that kind of take me down a spiral of like thoughts, like that actually require me to use my brain, that are much deeper, and connect to modern day problems. And so I thought that was lovely. Finally, we have The Book Thief. Now this is pretty fat, if I could say so myself. It's about 500, 600 pages. An Australian book. Very, very beautiful. If I had to choose out of the 4 books that I've read this month, this would be my favorite. Essentially, this is also historical fiction. It says, Liesel's brother dies on the children's journey to new home. At his graveside, she steals a copy of the Gravedigger's Handbook. This first act of book thievery leads to Liesel's love affair with words. Soon she is stealing books wherever she can, from the mayor's wife's library to Nazi book burnings. But these are dangerous times. When Liesel's foster family hides a young stranger in their basement, her world is both shut down and opened up in the most startling ways. And Liesel will soon understand. The story of war is countless stories, and this one is only beginning. I literally filled up 4 pages of annotations, and I felt like it's reasonable because this book is much thicker compared to the other 3 books I've read. And I gave this a 5-star because so good. It was so good. I definitely a recommended read. If it's the first time you're reading historical fiction, get yourself a copy, digital or physical. This would be a good fictional read, a historical fictional read. At first, I don't really think I anticipated very much, but this book was amazing, and it actually encouraged me to read more of historical fiction. And throughout reading, I often had moments where I felt emotions stirring me, anger, sadness, happiness, pity, etc. And occasionally when I was reading, I even gasped out loud, or like I made expressions because of the context. And I even had to stop to admire the writing style and the depth of a sentence. I thought that was so beautiful. And so I really love this book because one of the reasons why is because it made me feel like the entire range of emotions, and all in one story, which I think kudos to the author. I think it's incredible. I really enjoyed the author's writing style because he wrote in a way that was not only straight to the point, but also poetic and melodical. And so this perspective you get from death is also super cool. And I thought the narration sequence was also done well, without confusion, even when death occasionally spoils the events. Like, the author does the spoiling in a way that it still makes you interested. I really like the idea of death telling you a story, because he kind of is like a Grim Reaper, right? He collects these souls. And I thought that was ironic, because this death person is telling me a story, quoting from the book, to prove that you and your human existence are worth it. I thought that was ironic. But upon further consideration, I thought that, you know what? Grim Reapers would actually be one of the most qualified to prove this, right? Because they're there. They're there from when you start to die until you die, until they collect your soul. They're seeing it all. They're seeing the suffering. They're seeing the good things and the bad the good things and the bad things. They're seeing all of it. Yeah, from the very beginning, I already liked the approach of him. I liked the things he said, that we will all die, that you should know that, like a reminder. And it is ironic, because death is actually so much more humane than you'd imagine death personified to be, in my opinion. And I love also how he has so much respect for humans, even as he takes their souls. Like, how ironic is that? But I love it. It's like dark, but not. It's like, ironically, it's like dark, ironic, but comedic. I like this quote: "The impoverished always try to keep moving as if relocating might help. They ignore the reality that a new version of the same old problem will be waiting at the end of the trip." I liked it because it reminds me of the illusion that the grass is greener on the other side. And I thought that, like, we as humans are not objective enough sometimes, and perhaps afraid to accept. And I wrote it as a little reminder that change starts with me. We're always so dissatisfied with our life or with a certain part of something, but we tend to blame it on external things, without really considering that maybe I'm the problem. I like the phrasing, "the chaos of goodbye," because it feels relatable, and it's such a beautiful term. It's like so terrifyingly beautiful. I linked it to this other quote on page 118. "I guess humans like to watch a little destruction. Sandcastles, houses of cards, that's where they begin. Their great skill is their capacity to escalate." And then I wrote that, like, so from the very beginning, you know that Liesl kind of leaves her mom. Her brother dies. Like, it's so sad to be, like, I don't know, 10, and leaving your mom and accepting this circumstance as it's, like, such a normal thing at the time. And for the mother to be so strong to make the decision to send her daughter away because she knows she can't support her. And then on page 37 to 38, "A brute strength of the man's gentleness, his there-ness." And I love this because not only of the way that it's phrased, but a reminder that strength doesn't have to be in physicality. I feel like, especially nowadays, men think that, oh, I have to be, like, tough, testosterone, I have to be so large and big and strong. But I don't know, it was such a really beautiful way to phrase that strength isn't just physical. I like the accordion. The accordion is such an essential thing, in my opinion, throughout the story. The accordion, the music, as an announcement of safety on page 39. I love music. Music is a powerful thing. I just had to take that down. And over time, you kind of see there's this character called Rudy, which is essentially Liesl's best friend. You see his determination, the strength of a youth, of a sufferer, and the power of words and determination, like manifestation. He's already in the Nazi camp for the youths, and he's doing this, like, running competition. He's always looked up to this runner ever since he was a kid. And he's like, I will win this. I will prove to the people that thought I was nothing. And I was like, wow. I wish to have the determination and the strength that the youths have, right? It was really beautiful to see that. On page 113, I wrote, "Well, have you even tried again? You can't just sit around waiting for the new world to take it with you. You have to go out and be part of it, despite your past mistakes." I thought it was notable, and I took it down because I felt like, you know what, I can apply this advice to myself. I have to move on. Pick myself up. Another quote, 2 pages after, when Liesl's foster father's actual son left him because of his cowardice. He wasn't a Jew hater. He didn't really support the Nazis 100%, but his son did. And so the quote was he really a coward, as his son had pointed out? Certainly in the First World War, he considered himself one. He attributed his survival to it. But then, is there cowardice in the acknowledgement of fear? Is there cowardice in being glad that you lived? And it made me think, and I thought that was beautiful. Then there was this bit that I noted, because this next quote I thought was a very relatable thing to a lot of adults. If only she could be so oblivious again, to feel such love without knowing it, mistaking it for laughter and bread with only the scent of jam spread out on top of it. It was the best time of her life. And I thought that it reminded me very much of the fact that we really don't appreciate what we have enough until it's gone. And that we never fully are present in the moment. I think that's something hard for a lot of people, to stay in the present, to enjoy it. Because so often, especially in modern times, we're living or surviving in the present for our future. We're never fully immersed in being the present. And so I thought that was sad, but also true, and a reminder to kind of just appreciate. So Liesel is a book thief, and I thought what was notable was the power of words. So it is revealed gradually throughout the book, like the power of words, right? Because you see Liesel reading in the basement, the words connecting a Jew and a German, the words connecting the upper class with the poor, words that build someone's confidence and gives them strength to keep pushing and fighting, words that hurt and words that heal. If I had to talk about some of my favorite parts of the book, like for sure, I love the family moments, I love the friendships, the relationships, the bonding between the characters, but I also really enjoyed like the ferocity of Liesel. Like I say this not in the sense of the actual actions she did or the things she went through, but like more so her attitude and approach to things that she was facing. Like, you see her character development, you see her desperation, and it's so sad because, like, I think we all know what it's like to want and to need. Like, it shows that the things you feel and love drive you to do unthinkable things. Like, especially as you watch this child have a bond with someone she's not supposed to interact with. Like they're hiding a Jew in their basement, right? And the things she does to get a glance at the man again when he's taken away from her. Like, watching Liesel fight was sadder than anything else, and I don't know if it's because I was attached with her in the sense that, she's the main character, if it's because she's a child, or if it was that I saw a bit of myself in her as well. Like she was constantly losing things over and over, and it was so sad. Like, she literally came alone to Munich. Was it Munich? I don't remember. But then she left alone too. How sad is that? Because spoiler, at the end, she loses literally everybody. Like, everyone dies except her. And she moves to Sydney, and she has a family and grandkids and da-da-da-da, but she dies in Sydney. So, like, sure, the ending, at least, was very peaceful, because, at least she got to live and die naturally. But it was so touching, like, the anger, the inner strength you see. Like, even though it's very long, I feel like when you read a long book, it can get really tedious, it can get tiring to keep going, right? But the author was able to write in such a way that not only were was the writing style so beautiful and lyrical and melodical, but it's the fact that, like, so much is going on. Like, there's tension. One thing happens, another thing's happening right after. Like, the tension between every moment is never kind of released. It's like they're kind of like giving you a bit of the relief, but then not giving it to you fully. And so you never lose this momentum of interest and this wanting to find out what's happening, right? The last thing I noted was that I can't believe that we're still letting things like this happen. Like, this is history. I think it's normal for humans to find it difficult to learn from their past mistakes, but, like, these devastations had happened before, and, like, it's still happening, and we're still letting it happen. And I thought, I just don't know how we're, like, letting that happen. But I also know that this comes with a lot of, it's not just one thing, right? It's not just like, oh, you know what, we changed this, and then the world's peaceful again. It's like, no, it's like many different factors that come into play to make things the way they are right now. But just to know that, like, it's still happening and that we're letting it happen. This book review has gone on for way too long, and it's a bit messy and unorganized. But I definitely enjoyed these 4 reads of January. Like I said, The Book Thief, the last one I read, was my favorite out of the 4, and I think it's a great way to start the year, actually, to bank 4 books in 1 month. That's like a book a week. Awesome. And if you're still watching to this point, thanks for sticking all the way to the end and listening to my opinion, because who would even do that? Let me know if you've read any of these books, and feel free to leave like a detailed review about your opinions or your rating about the book. I'd be very intrigued to hear your opinions about it, and hopefully I can read enough the next month to do another book review. If not, I'll just do the single book review, or if I don't happen to finish if I don't happen to finish any book at all, maybe the next month after that. But it was honestly lovely talking through these books. So yeah, peace.